Blessings to everybody who's joined the seminar today. I've been invited by Trudy and Kun Kanchana and all the other organizers to speak to you a little bit on the wisdom and compassion of the Buddha. So it's an honor for me on the other side of the world, as it were, in Australia. But maybe just that simple fact already is showing you how the wisdom and compassion of the Buddha transcends so many boundaries. And we're all human beings in different parts of the world. We've all got different backgrounds, different ages, different languages. I'm in awe of everybody who's Swedish who can speak such good English. I speak no Swedish at all, so I'm embarrassed to say I don't have that skill. But we're all from different backgrounds, different genders, race, cultural backgrounds, and so on. And yet we all have an interest to be here to talk about and discuss the Buddhist teachings. And you can see, particularly over the last 50 years, say, the Buddhist teachings have spread all over the world. When I first encountered Buddhism, I was about 16 years old, living in London, the UK. And I wasn't brought up in a Buddhist family. I was brought up in a Christian family. Went to a school that was a Christian school. And yet I personally was drawn to the wisdom and compassion of the Buddha, first of all through books, just reading books and being attracted to the deep, profound wisdom of the Buddha. Sometimes they compare the Buddha to a doctor, but they call him a spiritual doctor. And he's a spiritual doctor with a remedy for every kind of human problem and suffering. And that was my conclusion the more I studied the Buddhist teachings. Every doubt I've had in my mind has been answered in one way or another by the Buddha, either just through the teachings he gave when he was alive, but also through the practices and the ways of practice that he left us as a kind of an inheritance for the world that I've been fortunate enough to encounter and make central to my life. I've never been disappointed by the wisdom of the Buddha or the compassion of the Buddha, and everything he said and taught over the years has been proven to me personally, and then I think to many, many other people, which is why we have this event today. And that continues to take place. As I said, we've experienced the growth or the spread of the Buddhist teachings around the world over particularly the last 50 years, and now with the internet, global travel, and so on. So we have Buddhist centers, temples, monasteries, teachers, students all over the world. And of course, in one sense, there are the, might say, the Buddhist cultural attachments, probably is the correct word to use, that we all have, particularly, coming from different Asian cultures where Buddhism originated, originally India, but then in East Asia, South Asia. As Buddhism has spread around the world, it has brought the different cultural attachments with it, perhaps. Today we have Tibetan monks, we have Thai-style Theravada monks, and there are different kinds of Buddhist monks and nuns around the world practicing. And each tradition may have its different way of chanting and dressing and talking about the Dhamma. But actually the very heart of Buddhism hasn't changed, and it's common throughout all of these traditions. And that's one interesting thing in the non-Buddhist countries, like say in Europe, USA, Australia, where people are coming to Buddhism from a fresh place, with looking at it with new eyes. You know, sometimes that has a certain value in that we can see through to the heart of the Buddha's teachings, not so bound up with the cultural paraphernalia and the attachment to the sort of cultural presentation of Buddhism. Not that that's wrong or bad, simply we don't have it. We don't have that baggage with us. When I encountered Buddhism, I didn't know anything about chanting, or the terminology of Buddhism, the different ways it's presented, the ceremonies, the rituals, Buddha statues, all the things that people are often confused by or find difficult to accept coming from a non-Buddhist background. I was the same. I didn't have any preconceived notions about Buddhism. I just read what the Buddha taught and was inspired by it and wanted to know more and practice more. And really, I think that's how it was in the time of the Buddha as well. If you think about it, when the Buddha was alive, there wasn't yet anything called Buddhism. There were what we call religious seekers, people who were interested to find spiritual contentment, happiness, inner happiness, answers to the basic problems of human beings that we all face everywhere. We all have to deal with the fact that having been born in the world, we're getting older every day. As we know, we face sickness, a possibility of sickness, injury every day. And one day we've got to die. And these are common experiences for every single person in this world. And this is what was one of the attractions that I had for the Buddhist teachings, in that what the Buddha was talking about was just basic, simple truths of life that affect us all. Why do I feel stressed, suffering? Sometimes why do I get angry? Why do I despair, feel worried about things, afraid of things? Why do I get frustrated in life? As well as why do I have to deal with physical pain and suffering? I think everybody will have these different thoughts and questions come up in their life. And for me, discovering the Buddhist teachings, I found that he had answers for them, ways to deal with the basic problems facing human beings, how to live together peacefully, cooperate, and live more harmoniously and help each other, how to do things well in the world, how to find some sense of meaning in life and find some happiness. These were some of the immediate attractions for the Buddhist teachings for me. My own interest in Buddhism led me to travel 10,000 kilometers to Thailand looking for a meditation teacher. And I was lucky. I had heard about Ajahn Chah, who became my teacher, who was considered to be a very wise, compassionate teacher. And that drew me like a magnet. I was drawn to him and his monastery and his community of monks and nuns practicing in northeast Thailand. So when I was about 20, I traveled to northeast Thailand to go and stay with Ajahn Chah and his community. And if you've ever been to Thailand, I know many people in Sweden go to Thailand for holidays, but when you go to Thailand, most people go to the tourist spots, to the beaches, to the mountains of the north, to the glamorous or interesting places. In those days, very few people went to northeast Thailand. Very few people went to Ubon Ratchathani, which is where Ajahn Chah lived. It was off the tourist trail. It's right in the corner between Laos, Cambodia, and Thailand. And in those days, there was still fighting in those countries. The communist wars weren't quite ended yet. It wasn't a place you would go normally, and yet I was drawn there. Nobody forced me to go. I just went because I was interested to practice Buddhism, a living tradition, a living monastic tradition. I was drawn to the monk's life in particular. So I went to stay with Ajahn Chah, and I started at, he had set up what we call the International Forest Monastery. So I went to stay there in the early 1980s. If you look at northeast Thailand, or that area, Ubon, Ratchathani, from say Google Earth, you look down, you're looking down on a place that has the highest concentration of Buddhist temples and monks in the world, somebody told me. There may be other places that have a lot of Buddhist Sangha, of course, but Ubon Ratchathani in particular has lots of monasteries, lots of monks. So we have a joke, we say it's the main export of that part of Thailand. They grow a lot of rice as well, and I'm sure they produce other things as well, but they actually produce a lot of monks. And just now, Trudy was saying, or Kanchana was saying, in Sweden, there's now 30, I think, Buddhist temples, particularly Thai temples. And I'm sure there'll be a few monks from Ubon province there, because they've spread all over the world. Myself becoming a monk there was like a second birth for me. We say we're born, from our mother's womb, and then we're born again as a monk. It's like our second birth, second life. So many monks have been born and created, or you could say manufactured, in Ubon and sent out around the world now. And that is one of Thailand's great offerings to the world, is helping in the spread of the Buddhist teachings for the benefit of everyone. Of course, there are many other Buddhist cultures and traditions that have also spread out, such as the Tibetan Buddhists, Sri Lanka, many other ethnic Buddhist groups are spread around the world. But Ubon is special in that sense, high concentration of Buddhists with great faith, and even though it's traditionally quite poor economy, poor place, harsh conditions, it's produced lots of very wise and compassionate monks and nuns for the benefit of us all. And I personally, I'm living proof of that. I benefited from meeting with my teacher, Ajahn Chah, and living and practicing there, to the point whereas eventually I've been invited to live in Australia again, because people are interested to learn and practice about Buddhism. They find it helpful. The word Ubon, the name of the city there, means lotus. And sometimes they compare the human mind to like a lotus. And our mind is like a lotus. If you have a pond and you see the lotus in the pond, it starts off down in the pond, in the water. And as the sun comes out and warms up the water, the lotus plant starts to grow and move up through the pond to the surface. And if the sun keeps going, that lotus flower will start to bloom. It will open up. And they compare this to the effects of the Buddha's words and teachings on the human mind. We all have this inner potential for realizing peace, happiness, for developing wisdom and compassion, for overcoming our problems and helping others as well. But we need the right stimulus, and the right stimulus is the sun in the case of the lotus. In the case of the human heart or the human mind, it's the words of wisdom and compassion from our teachers, our good friends, our spiritual friends. That's the beginning of our practice, and that's what nourishes us and gets our own inner lotus growing up through the murky, muddy waters of the pond. We can grow lotuses here, even in the mountains of southern Australia, which are quite cold. You probably assume Australia is just a hot country, but here it's quite cold. And but you can still grow lotus in the ponds. When the sun comes out, it still warms the water enough for the lotuses to grow up. But they're coming up through very muddy waters. The waters here are quite muddy. We get a lot of rain. But it can, with the sun's rays and time in the right conditions, you can still get a beautiful blooming lotus. So I've always found that a very useful reminder of my own and the other people's inner potential for developing wisdom, compassion, peace, and happiness. We all have it within us. It's just we have to nurture these qualities. And that was one reason why I became a Buddhist monk, is just because I found that the cultural environment, because Buddhist monasticism is one form of culture in the world, I found that very suitable for nurturing my own spiritual qualities. To be honest, I didn't trust myself as a layperson before I was a monk to do the job well on my own. I thought I needed help. So that's one thing that drew me to training as a Buddhist monk and drew me to Ajahn Chah, a very good teacher. If you want to train in something, you might as well seek out a good teacher, and he was a very good teacher. But we need some help to nurture our inner lotus or the inner goodness within us. So it is important to find teachers, guides, and what we call good friends, spiritual friends who can provide a good example and support us, especially in the beginning of our practice or our journey to find inner peace. Sometimes Ajahn Chah used to say, as you're developing your heart in this world, in your life, you need to develop the qualities of the similar qualities to your mother and father. Like when we're physically born, we're born to the womb, through the womb of our mother, and our parents, they bring us up when we're young, when we're totally defenseless, helpless. They'll give everything for us, to us, and for us, do everything for us. They'll nurture us, feed us, care for us in every possible way. Until hopefully we grow up and we're old enough and mature enough and strong enough and skillful enough to look after ourselves. That's probably the goal of parents, isn't it? To bring their children into the world so that they can then go off and look after themselves. But as we come to look at our own mind, we also need to have those same qualities, the qualities of our inner mother and father, you might say. Ajahn Chah used to say that, as you train yourself to understand the truth, to understand where peace comes from, to understand the true nature of things, from developing ourselves from the inside out, you might say, we need to develop the inner mother and father, which is just these different aspects of the mind, which are going to help us to grow as a human being. Sometimes we need to be firm with ourselves because we often get caught into bad habits, or we become lazy and stubborn in our life, or we do things that are very harmful for ourselves or others. So sometimes we have to be quite firm with ourselves and very direct and tell ourselves what to do and what we shouldn't do. Other times we need to be quite gentle with ourselves. So, like a mother, if you're suffering, you have pain, or you have stress, or you're miserable, sometimes you also need to give yourself support. You need to soothe yourself, calm yourself down sometimes. Sometimes you need to give yourself words of encouragement to keep going through difficulty and so on. So I found that very pertinent in my own life and practice, just developing these inner voices that are giving the right encouragement or the right words of admonition, or even criticism, self-criticism, when done from a place of well-being, well-wishing, compassion, kindness. These have been very important, and it's something you learn from the practice of meditation and just self-investigation and developing mindfulness. You have to learn to talk to yourself properly as a human being. We learn in the world a lot about how to talk to other people and communicate, and we learn all kinds of knowledge and skills, and we go on and use that in life to earn a living and do things in the world, and that's all good. The one thing that the Buddha pointed out is that whatever you do in the world, if you haven't got your inner world, the world of your heart, your mind sorted out, then there'll still be problems in your life. You know? So we have to learn how to talk to ourselves or develop this inner voice, the correct inner voice that is going to help nurture the qualities that will bring us more peace, more happiness, more wisdom. So sometimes we need to be very firm with ourselves, pick ourselves up, push ourselves a bit. Sometimes we need to tell ourselves to calm down. And these are the kind of skills you learn in meditation. You know, the technical terms you might have learned are meditation on the practice of developing calm, or samatha, serenity meditation, and the other is development of insight, vipassana, or clear seeing of the way things are, which helps us to develop wisdom. And Buddhism is based around this training, the training in learning to calm the heart, balance our emotions, bring up a sense of well-being and inner peace, just as we were trying earlier with the breath meditation. But then to use that calm that we develop through meditation to investigate the truth, to understand things better. These are the two sides or the two aspects of meditation, calm and then insight. And if we're going to do anything to help the world or improve the world, care for other people, understand other people better, go across cultural boundaries, this is something that I think is really essential, and it's certainly something the Buddha emphasized. We have to learn how to develop inner calm and inner understanding in order to understand others. But it's quite natural. The more you put effort into learning about your own mind and how to free it up from stress, suffering, bring it to a place of peace and understanding, you can't really avoid learning about other people and realizing that other people are much the same as yourself. As I was saying earlier, we all have to experience birth, aging, sickness, and death. This is just the basic facts of human life. And with that, we often have a lot of suffering, don't we? Physical suffering, but then also the mental suffering, the worries, the anxieties, the fears, the disappointments, and so on. And the more you're learning and understanding about your own experience, particularly through developing self-reflection, investigation, examination of your own body and mind, your own human experience, the more you realize other people are much the same. And the Thais have a phrase, putting your heart into the heart of others. And that's very much one of the results of the practice of Buddhist meditation and opening up your heart to understand the truth of life. You know, as you become more aware of yourself, you can't help but become a little bit more sensitive and aware of other people. As you become more aware of yourself, becoming more mindful and learning what leads to what. If you are feeling stressed or miserable or unhappy, where's that come from? Or if you're feeling very peaceful and calm, where's that come from? Learning about this, you start to notice other people are in much the same situation as ourselves. Whether you are of the same gender or the same belief system, you have the same interests, whether you're of different age groups, doesn't matter. You know, all of us as human beings have a mind, and we're sensitive. We feel pleasure, we feel pain. We all want to be peaceful and happy. We all have that, but we all have different ways of going about finding more peace, more happiness. And what attracted me to the Buddhist teachings was it's such a clear guideline of how to live in this world so that you can develop the qualities that help you to understand yourself and then help and understand other people and help them. Before I became a monk, I was traveling in Africa, and I actually met a couple of Swedish people who I traveled with for a while, and we got on very well together, even though we were from very different backgrounds, different interests. But one thing I discovered while traveling in Africa before I was a monk is that in order to help other people, we have to learn to help ourselves. I went to Africa just to travel, just to look, broaden my experience of life, and obviously encountered a lot of different experiences, met some very good people, kind people, but also saw a lot of poverty and even conflict, physical armed conflict. But one thing, one conclusion I drew from traveling in Africa was that I had a wish to help, give something back in some way to the people there, because I realized coming from the UK, from London, city life, I had a lot of, you might say, privileged background. I had lots of things that the average person in Africa didn't have. I had lots of comforts, convenience, wealth, and so on, and they didn't have. So I thought maybe I should be doing something to help. But then thinking more deeply, I thought, well, what can I do to help other people? You know, I thought maybe I could do some volunteering or join some organization that help to educate, provide education or something, you know, the usual sort of things you might think of, how you can help other people in a place like Africa. But then I was looking at myself and I was thinking, yeah, but I don't really know how to help myself yet. I still get angry and frustrated, and I still have confusion, and I have many doubts about life and what is right and what is wrong. So here's me, perhaps a little conceited, thinking I'm going to go and help poor people, but then stopping and realizing I haven't even helped myself yet. So rather than joining an organization or volunteering or something like that, I thought I really need to go off and learn more about myself as a human being in order to really sort out my own problems, my own stresses and sufferings. Then I may be in a better position to help others. So the Buddhist teachings are kind of on this, based on this idea or this principle, is that of course it's a great thing to help others, and the more we understand our own limitations and problems, we realize other people have similar problems and have to encounter similar things. But if we haven't learned to understand our own mind yet, we're not that peaceful yet, there's only so much we can do for other people or understanding other people. So Buddhist teachings kind of emphasize this. This is why Buddhist meditation and developing kindness and compassion in different ways, you know, it starts with yourself first, working outwards towards other people. Because you see so often in the world when we're idealistic, and I've certainly had my fair share of idealism, you go out to help other people. If you haven't gained your own understanding how to look after your own mind in different situations, well, you often can get burnt out or end up even going out to help people, but end up teaching them the wrong thing or not really helping them up at all. My first insight into that was when I was about 17. I was working in a shop in London and I saw a lot of homeless people on the streets, and so I'd feel sorry for them and think, oh, I should help them. I'm earning money, they don't have any money. So sometimes I would give them money. But 3 doors down from the shop I was working in was what we called an off license. In Australia, they call it a bottle shop, a place that sells alcohol. And I noticed the people I'd give money to, with my good heart, kind heart, they'd go and take their money and buy alcohol. I was telling them to buy food, and they just go and buy beer or spirits or whatever. So after a while, I stopped doing that and realized, maybe there's a better way to help people. You know, I have to think about this more. Idealism is a bit like that. You know, often we have an idea to help others, do something good in the world, but often you have to stop and think about it, don't you? Just giving money to someone, it may be appropriate in some situations, but in others, maybe it's making their situation worse. So if you give money to an alcoholic, they'll probably just go and drink more alcohol, and it'll bring them closer to their death, won't it? So that was my first insight into helping yourself, helping others. I realized I really have to think about life more and understand myself better in order to help others. So Buddhism comes from this kind of basic background, learning to help yourself so that you can help others. And you do it together. It's not that you just help yourself without ever helping others until you reach a certain point, a point of enlightenment, and off you go to help others. You do it hand in hand at the same time. But it's essential that you're also learning for yourself as you help others. So just as we're talking today, my teacher Ajahn Kalyano used to say, when you're talking about Buddhism, you're sharing or you're teaching others, you're also teaching yourself. Don't forget that. It's not like, I know everything and I'm telling you what is what. I'm also learning in this very moment, in this very situation. And as we interact with other people in the world, that's what we have to do, isn't it? We have to learn for ourselves as we're learning about other people. So keeping an open mind, an open heart, and learning as we go seems to be the right way. And the Buddhist teachings are full of that encouragement to learn from experience, to understand things better. And the Buddhist teachings were not just a set of doctrines that the Buddha said, you have to believe these to be Buddhist. If you don't believe, you're not a follower of the Buddha, you're not one of us. It wasn't presented in that way. The way the Buddha taught was to test out the teachings that the Buddha gave. The Buddha's teachings are like a roadmap, teaching people to live their lives in a way, or to learn and grow in a way that will bring them peace and happiness, and bring peace and happiness to others. But they weren't just based on beliefs, they were based on principles and guidelines that you then have to take away and put to the test for yourself. So as Buddhism has spread around the world, we can see it's gone literally to every continent, every corner of the world nowadays, which I would say is that, that's the blessing for the world. But it hasn't come about through some master plan, people wanting to convert others to Buddhism and go into all these places where they never had Buddhist teachings before and change everyone to become Buddhists. It's a much more organic thing. The Buddhist teachings seem to have a lot of wisdom in them, and that naturally draws people to those teachings, and they want to learn from them and then put them into practice in their life. But nobody's making you do that. There's no sense of compulsion, or nobody is trying to forcefully convert anyone. It's just naturally that people find they make sense. That's certainly my experience. And that is why they are attractive to people in the world. So we have to learn how to, say, as on the part of teachers, Buddhist teachers, we have to learn how to make that, the wisdom, the compassion of the Buddha available to the world. So there are the cultural trappings and limitations of Buddhism, but we also have to see how we can adapt them to different countries, different cultures as Buddhist teaching spread around the world. My teacher, Ajahn Kalyano, he was brought up in northeast Thailand, this quite poor area. He got a very simple education just to the age of about 12, and then he left school, as so many kids do in that part of the world, because there's no money or time for further education. And yet he became a very wise Buddhist teacher with hundreds of thousands, probably millions of students all over the world. He didn't plan that. He didn't have some master plan to take over the world using Buddhist teachings. He was just a very humble man, but with very special qualities, particularly a great determination to learn for himself what the Buddha taught and come to an understanding for himself. And then with great compassion to share his understanding with others. And he just began in a very simple jungle setting in northeast Thailand, and was practicing for himself very sincerely, very diligently, came to find great peace in his heart. And when you say peace in your heart, in Buddha's terms, that means finding a way to remove the causes for suffering from his heart. And he managed to overcome or abandon the three roots of suffering that human beings get caught into all the time. It's greed, anger, and delusion. That's the kind of the Buddhist summary of why human beings suffer, because we follow our greed, we follow our anger, we follow delusion, therefore we suffer. He managed to abandon those three qualities from his heart. This is what we call the enlightenment experience. And then he taught that, how to do that. He taught the Buddhist path to others, first of all monks, and then nuns, and then the lay people, first of all just the local villagers who would come and practice, support the monks and nuns, and then practice with them. But gradually, because of the quality of his wisdom and because of the boundless nature of his compassion, he started to spread those teachings simply by people coming to see him, find him, seek him out, just like myself, because of the quality of his teachings, because of the sense of peace. When you meet a good teacher, their words make sense, there's a sense of peace, and there's a great acceptance. And part of the practice of compassion is acceptance of whoever it is you're engaging with. These are the sort of qualities that were emanating from Ajahn Chah and drew people from all around Thailand and now all around the world. And even though he died many years ago, his teachings are still living on through his talks, his books, and then his students, who, like myself and many others, there are a number of Swedish monks in our community around the world, as well as from many other nations. These teachings have gone around the world now and are still available, fortunately, in book form and in talks, and then students who have lived with Ajahn Chah and gone off and established monasteries and places of practice around the world. They're still here today for our benefit. But the interesting thing is Ajahn Chah didn't kind of plan that. It's not like a commercial organization. It's not like, say, IKEA, who may sit down, their CEO and the board sit down and say, where are we going to build our next store, and where are we going to send IKEA products around the world in its commercial sense. Buddhism is not the same. It just spreads quite naturally because people have an interest to find peace, happiness, to grow, to learn, they want to experience more well-being, and that draws them to the wisdom and compassion of the Buddha. And it works. People put these teachings into practice and it works. So the proof is in the practice, really, isn't it? It's not simply believing in the Buddha. You may believe in the beginning, it is based maybe on belief, faith. You have some belief that what the Buddha taught seems to be true, some faith that it's a good thing. But what's really I think led to the spread of the Buddhist teachings and helped so many people is that they've actually practiced them and found that they really work. Maybe I'll finish just giving an example. Like when I went to Thailand quite quickly, my teacher became very ill, and I spent some of the first years of my life as a monk just caring for my teacher. And I learned a lot of lessons from that, just putting into practice the Buddhist teachings I had received from him and from other teachers, putting it into practice, caring for him, and seeing the important thing is, learning to appreciate what is good in the world, good in the teacher, good in the things you've received in the world. I gave something back by trying to help my teacher at the end of his life. And I notice in Buddhism, you see that all the time. People are constantly appreciating the good in themselves, the good in others, and then giving something back. And there was one female doctor, a Thai doctor I knew. We used to joke, her name was Kalyano. My name as a monk is Kalyano, which means one who is good. It's not that I'm good, it's just a name I was given to aspire to or inspire me to practice. Her name was Kalyano, so it's the female version of Kalyano. So I knew this doctor, and she, unfortunately, later in life, she got cancer, if I remember rightly, stomach cancer. It was maybe 30 years ago. And she was a very supportive Buddhist of our monastery of Ajahn Chah and the community of monks. And she would come to the monastery to learn meditation, listen to the Dhamma, to help. She obviously had her own work as a doctor, but she would give up her free time to practice Buddhism and do meditation and so on. But then she got stomach cancer and so was terminally ill. So I visited her many times during her illness. And just like our teacher, she took on, her task, she said, was to practice Buddhism through her illness, to apply what the Buddha taught through her illness. So every day she would practice meditation to calm her mind, bring up mindfulness, calm her mind from the anxiety, steady the mind through the painful feelings that she had to experience, and she had a lot of pain, and deal with all that trauma and all the disappointments of, she wasn't that old. She's, if I remember, she's probably in her 60s when she got cancer. But there, you'd have to deal with a lot of disappointment getting terminal cancer. You've got to face the end of your life, separating from everybody you love and like. All of that she was determined to face using the Buddhist teachings. So I'd visit her and she said, well, Ajahn Chah could meditate and practice through his illness until he died. I'm going to do the same. If only out of respect and devotion to the teacher, I'm going to put his teachings into practice and follow his example. And she did that very well. And eventually she had to move into hospital because she needed daily care, chemotherapy, and so on. And she was very sick, very weak, and becoming very skinny because basically she was starving to death, unfortunately. But at the same time, she was very inspiring. And we would laugh. I'd go and visit her and talk about meditation and different aspects of Buddhist practice with her, and just give her words of encouragement. And her friends would go and visit her daily, and she had a lot of friends, colleagues, ex-patients, and so on. But they all said one thing. They said when they went to see her, they would be the ones who felt supported by her. They felt it was an honor to go and visit this doctor who was meditating through her terminal cancer. They felt they were gaining something. She would be very peaceful. She didn't have a lot of strength to speak much. She would listen, say a few words, and just be a very peaceful presence sitting on her hospital bed. All the friends who were full of energy and vitality, because they're still healthy, would go and visit, but they'd all go away feeling they had got something from that interaction. They were the ones learning. They were the ones blessed to see someone dealing with their illness so well. And she said everything she got from the Buddhist teachings, from Ajahn Chah and from the words of the Buddha. And she said, as she was getting closer to death, she really benefited from the Buddhist teachings because they helped her to find inner peace, even though physically her body was falling apart, literally, and she was dying a quite unpleasant death physically. She said mentally she's still happy inside because she understands that if you can see this body as impermanent, which it is, as we get older every day, one day it will die. And if you can understand that what is impermanent, you ultimately, in the deeper sense, you don't own. You don't own your body. You can't command it not to get old, not to get sick, not to die. She would say, if you can see that, then you can find inner peace. And that, you might say, is the heart of Buddhist practice, is learning to see that you don't own this body. You're related to this body, you have it for a while, and then you give it back to the world. And that is what we call wisdom, when you can see the impermanent nature of this physical body, the fact that it's something you don't own, you don't control, you just borrow from the world and then give back to the world. Then you can find peace. And where does that peace arise? It arises in your own mind, your own heart, coming from seeing the truth. That brings your mind to an acceptance of truth, and you find the result of that is you find inner calm, tranquility, peace. So the highest peace in Buddha's explanation is it comes from wisdom, seeing the way things are. And the result of that is great sensitivity and compassion towards others. So this doctor would sit on her bed, just telling people how she was practicing through her last weeks and days. And everybody would go away, all the visitors, her friends would go away feeling fortunate to have met her and been with her that day. So in the end, the doctor who was dying became the blessing for the healthy. She didn't plan that. That wasn't her intention, I don't think. She was just being honest and saying, this is how I'm dealing with my illness. And she was doing it very well. She died what we call a beautiful death. But as she did that, her compassion was such that she was able to share her experience and inspire many other people. And over again through the years, I've met monks, nuns, men and women who have put these Buddhist teachings into practice in similar ways and shown that they really do help us to deal with the basic suffering of human existence, old age, sickness and death, the ups and downs of life. You know, they give us a means, a way or a method to deal with that very well. So I think I've come to the end of my time now for this talk. So thank you for listening, and I wish you all well. And I think we have some further events now to participate in. But anyway, for the moment, I wish you all well.